So in today's lessons, we are going to look at pathogens in a little bit more detail. I've already given you a definition for a pathogen. Okay, so pathogens are microorganisms that cause disease. By microorganism, I just mean a small living thing that causes a disease. And there are 4 different types of pathogen that you need to know. There are bacteria, viruses, protists, and fungi. Now, you are probably already relatively familiar with bacteria and viruses, but I don't expect you to know anything about protists or fungi. That's what we're going to be looking at in today's lesson, okay? Pathogens, I've just said that they cause disease. The type of disease that they cause are communicable diseases. Because pathogens can spread from one person to the next, the diseases that they cause can spread from one person to the next. So we'd say pathogens cause communicable diseases. We're going to look at the different pathogens in more detail, and we're going to start with bacteria. So these notes you would already have in your book, but from now, this is all new, so I need you to take it down. So the first thing we're going to look at is bacteria. And what's important to know is that there are lots and lots of different types of bacteria. So just like there are lots of different types of plants and lots of different types of animals, there are lots of different types of bacteria. So I'm going to start by writing that down. Lots of different types. And you may already be aware that some bacteria do not cause disease. So you've got lots of bacteria in your body, lots in your digestive system, for example, that do not cause you harm at all and are actually good for your health. So not all bacteria cause disease. And because they do not all cause disease, I can say that not all bacteria are pathogens. So to be classed as a pathogen, you have to cause a disease. Some bacteria will cause a disease and they are pathogens, but other types of bacteria will not cause a disease. And if they're not causing a disease, they are not a pathogen. Now, although I said that there are lots of different types of bacteria, they do all have certain things in common, okay? And I'm going to draw out their structure, a kind of a general overview of a bacteria structure now. You would have seen this back at the beginning of year 9 when we did this topic. And the first thing I'm going to write is that bacteria are prokaryotes. And hopefully you all remember that there's 2 different types of cell. There are eukaryotes and there are prokaryotes. Eukaryotes have a nucleus, prokaryotes have no nucleus, and bacteria are examples of prokaryotes. So when I draw out the general structure of a bacteria cell, I will not be drawing a nucleus. Okay, so I'm going to start by drawing this out. I want you to draw it too. Draw kind of like an ovally shape. I'm going to draw another around the outside. Okay, this inside line I'm going to call the cell membrane. And this outside line here, I'm going to call the cell wall. So bacteria cells do have cell walls, just like plant cells. Our own cells do not have cell walls. We've got cell membranes, but only bacteria and plants have cell walls. Bacteria can also have a little tail-like structure, and that tail is called a flagellum, and it will help the bacteria to move. Now, not all bacteria have flagellum. Only some bacteria will have them, but they do all have a cell wall and they do all have a cell membrane. Okay? You've got this kind of like jelly-like stuff in the center of cells called the cytoplasm, which you would see in animal cells and in plant cells. Okay? And although we've written that bacteria have no nucleus, that doesn't mean that they don't have DNA. So in our animal cells, we do have a nucleus, and within that nucleus, you find DNA. Bacteria do not have a nucleus, but they do still have DNA. And they've got their DNA just sits out in the cytoplasm. Okay, and there's 2 forms. Draw a small circle, that is called plasmid DNA. So it's just a small circular loop of DNA sitting in the cytoplasm, and we call it plasmid DNA. And then I've got this larger structure here, which I call chromosomal DNA. Okay, bacteria do have DNA, they just don't have a nucleus. So the DNA sits in the cytoplasm instead of sitting in the nucleus. Okay, now again, there are lots and lots of different types of bacteria, and they do all have quite different structures. This is just a general overview of the structure of a bacteria cell. Okay, but what we're going to look at now is we are going to look at the mode of action. And what I mean by that is we know that some bacteria infect our bodies and make us feel ill, but what exactly is it that they're doing? What do they do to our bodies that makes us feel sick? So this is going to be their mode of action. Now, I've already said that not all bacteria make you feel sick, okay? But the ones that do make you feel sick and that do cause disease, what is it that they do? So of the bacteria that make you feel ill, most of those bacteria produce toxins. Now, toxins are just some sort of poisonous substance, and what those toxins do is they damage the host cells, and that will cause disease. Okay, so they produce toxins, some sort of poisonous substance that damages host cells. By host cells, I just mean whatever the bacteria is infected. So if the bacteria has infected a plant, the plant will be the host. If the bacteria infects the human will be the host. So whoever they're infecting or whatever they're infecting, that's going to be the host. And those toxins are going to damage cells and cause disease. Now, there's lots of different ways that the toxins can damage cells. Okay, they can destroy the cell membrane. They can disrupt the DNA and stop the cells dividing. They can interfere with the enzymes in a cell and stop them catalyzing all of those chemical reactions. Okay, there's lots of different ways that those toxins can affect a cell. You don't need to know them, and it will depend on the type of bacteria and the type of toxin that they are producing. Okay, we're next just going to have a look at the different types of diseases caused by bacteria, and there are tons and tons of types of diseases that can be caused by bacteria, but there's only two that you are specifically required to know. One disease is called cholera, and it's a disease that affects humans, and it's caused by a bacteria, and it will cause severe diarrhea to the point that you can actually die from this disease. Okay, so the disease itself is called cholera. It's caused by a bacteria, and it will affect your digestive system and can cause severe diarrhea. Another disease is called tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is how it's pronounced. It can also be abbreviated to just TB. So instead of writing tuberculosis, you could just write TB. And it's another disease that affects humans. And this disease will damage the lungs. And it can lead to you coughing up blood. Okay, so it's another disease caused by a bacteria. That bacteria gets into your lungs. It damages your lungs. Your lungs can fill up with phlegm and fill up with mucus. That will cause you to cough quite a lot, and you can also cough up blood. Both the diseases are fatal and can kill you if left untreated. So there are two different diseases caused by bacteria, both affecting humans. There are lots and lots of other diseases, but these two you are specifically expected to know. We're actually going to come back to these diseases in a later lesson when we look at how bacteria spread from one person to another, because different bacteria will spread in different ways. We'll be coming back to these diseases again in a later lesson to look at how the bacteria are actually spreading from one person to another. But for now, we are going to move over a new page, and we are going to look at another type of pathogen. We are going to look at viruses. Now, the thing with viruses, even though I'm classifying them as a pathogen, so I'm classifying them as a microorganism or tiny living thing, viruses are actually technically non-living. So to be described as living, there are certain criteria you must meet, and viruses meet some of those criteria, but they don't meet others. And the main thing that they just don't meet, that they should, is that they can't divide by themselves, so they're not able to replicate themselves, as they cannot divide by themselves. And what you'll see when we talk about their mode of action in a few minutes is that they need to infect a host in order to be able to replicate. So when they're by themselves and they haven't infected anything, they can't divide and they can't grow. And if you can't grow and divide by yourself, then technically you're not classed as living. Okay? But we do still include them as a pathogen. Okay? We should know that there are, just like bacteria, there are lots and lots of different types of viruses. But unlike bacteria, every single one of them are pathogenic. And when I mean pathogenic, when I say pathogenic, I mean that they all cause disease. So with bacteria, I said there's lots of types of bacteria. Some of them cause disease, some of them don't. With viruses, every single type of virus is going to cause a disease. Okay, there are no good viruses that are good for your health. They are all causing disease. And they are so infectious that they can even infect bacteria. So they can infect bacteria and destroy the bacteria. So viruses will infect humans, they will infect plants, they will even infect bacteria. And each time they infect, they cause disease. They are all pathogenic. And there are lots of different types of virus, and they will all look different, but there are a few things that they have in common. And I'm going to draw a general sketch of what a virus would look like. And I'm going to start by drawing a kind of it looks like an L. I'm going to make it, so just some sort of random squiggle. It shouldn't look like anything in particular, okay? And I'm going to put that random squiggle inside a circle that has a few spikes on it. And that random squiggle that I've drawn is actually supposed to be genetic material. So by genetic material, I mean DNA, but it can also be RNA. So we haven't looked at RNA at all. We've only looked at DNA. But there are two different types of genetic material, and viruses only have one type. They've either got DNA, so some of them will have DNA and some of them will have RNA, but they'll just have a single strand of it that just loops up within the center of the virus, and then that genetic material is surrounded by a protein coat, so a coat made out of protein. And again, the structure of that coat is going to vary massively from one virus to the next, okay? But they do all have some form of genetic material, one type, either DNA or RNA, and it sits inside a protein coat. So the next thing we will look at now is the mode of action. How do viruses work? What exactly do they do when they get inside your body? So what they will do is they will infect the host cell. Okay, so they're not just going to float around in your bloodstream, they are going to get right inside your cells. And when they get inside your cell, they take over the DNA. So if you remember what you would have learned as a function of DNA, we learned that DNA controls the cell. So it's kind of like the control center of the cell. And when viruses get into your cell, they go straight for the DNA and they take over. And when they take over, they can basically make your cell do whatever it is that they want. And what they want to do is they want to replicate. So remember I said that viruses can't replicate by themselves. They can't multiply by themselves. But as soon as they've infected someone, they take over the DNA. And once they've gained control of that DNA, they can then use your cell to multiply. So once they've infected and taken over, they're going to make loads and loads of new viruses inside your cell. Okay, but they don't want all those viruses trapped inside your cell. What they want to do is release those viruses. So once they've taken over and they've made loads and loads of new viruses in your cell, what they will do is they will cause the cell to burst open. And when that cell bursts open, the cell will die. And when the cell bursts open, all of those new viruses are released. Okay, so you don't need to be able to describe this, and you really don't need to be able to describe this at all. But you look at that in more detail, I think, if you do A level. But they get right inside. So if I look, I'm going to script right over here. If it was to infect a bacteria, they would get
they would get inside the bacteria cell, and then they would take over this DNA. And once they'd taken over the DNA, they would be able to use the cell to create loads and loads and loads of little viruses. And once they've made enough viruses, they would cause the cell to just burst open and then release all those new viruses. Then all the new viruses that have been released could then go and infect other cells. I'm going to continue with this in the next video.